Hey gang, it's Squill, and boy oh boy, this is a video I was very excited to make. The Tree Trunks video, baby! Tree Trunks is one of the biggest side characters in all of Adventure Time, but also one of the most hated. I'll frequently see her show up at the bottom of people's character rankings, and I never fully got why, as she's a character who I personally can't get enough of. So to convince you Tree Trunks haters that she's actually a good character, let's go over the history and evolution of one of Adventure Time's sexiest characters. Tree Trunks is one of the very few characters in Adventure Time to have the honor of appearing in the very first episode, Slumber Party Panic. In fact, outside of some random candy citizens, she is the 5th character to appear in the series overall, behind Jake, Lady, Finn, and PB. She doesn't really do much here, pretty much just getting this one line. But this is the origin of the ever so iconic Tree Trunks' hot buns joke. Gee, I sure hope this line doesn't come back to bite Finn in the ass at some point. This is kinda nitpicky, but I have to wonder what Tree Trunks is even doing here at the Candy Kingdom. I mean, I know she probably visits semi-frequently, but why so late at night, and why with a basket of hot buns? Anyways, alongside being one of the first characters to ever appear, Tree Trunks also has the honor of being the first character to have an episode named after her, with her titular episode being the 4th of the entire series. This is a pretty simple episode about her going on an adventure with Finn and Jake, but it establishes a lot of traits we'll come to know about Tree Trunks as a character, with the most obvious being her love of baking apple pie. She values her pie so much that the moment a fly touches it, it's tainted and goes straight in the trash. Her entire journey in this episode is her getting to taste the crystal gem apple, but alongside that is Tree Trunks' dynamic with Finn and Jake. She's kinda like their grandma in a way, baking them food, telling them stories, and in turn, Finn is very protective of Tree Trunks. He loves her, but is obviously worried for her well-being. Tree Trunks' voice actress, the late Polly Lou Livingston, was a friend of Penn Ward's mom and had known him ever since he was 11. Based on the commentary track for this episode, it seems as if she had a very strong connection with Ward, one that clearly comes through in Tree Trunks' character. There's a simple beauty that Tree Trunks sees in the world that just feels so earnest and sincere. An almost childlike sense of bliss. And alongside that, this episode gives us a good look at Tree Trunks' adventurous side, an aspect of her character that will become much more prevalent as the show goes along. Despite her age, she is still very clearly young at heart. And this aspect of her character is especially shown through her pure erotic sexuality. She even deems herself the sexiest adventurer in the world. Hey, this isn't the TV-14 show. Tree Trunks' horniness is not an aspect of her character that will be going away anytime soon, so you better get used to it. In the end, Finn and Jake embrace their inner Tree Trunks to get to the crystal apple. But really, they didn't need to put the makeup on, all they had to do was not fight the crystal guys. But whatever, Tree Trunks gets a bite of the apple and instantly explodes, in what is easily one of the grimmest endings of the entire series. Especially if you watch the original version, without that last shot of Tree Trunks in the crystal dimension. This ending is pretty notable for being the first ever major status quo shift in Adventure Time, as Tree Trunks is completely absent for the rest of Season 1, as well as the first 7 episodes of Season 2. Barring an awkward non-speaking cameo 8 episodes later in Evicted, obviously a result of that episode airing out of order. But regardless, it's definitely cool that Tree Trunks has the first ever multi-episode storyline in Adventure Time history, with Season 2's Crystals of Power being the first episode to directly follow the events of a previous episode. That is with the maybe exception of Henchmen, which is more of a loose follow-up to Marcy's debut in Evicted. But while I love that they chose to follow up on this episode conceptually, in execution, it's kind of a mess. Her being brainwashed into becoming Corsian, the Crystal Queen, is a fine enough idea. It definitely plays a bit with the horny side of her character, as seen in the last episode. But I hate her being attracted to Finn and calling him sexy. Just ew. Not only does this appearance depict Tree Trunks as, well, a pedophile, but it also kind of sours the wonderful grandmother and grandson dynamic she had with Finn back in her season 1 episode. And before anyone says that this was just her being brainwashed, near the end of the episode she goes up to Finn, calls him cute, and says that she likes him. This can of course be interpreted multiple different ways, but coming right after she calls Finn sexy, I don't know. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and argue that most of the hatred that Tree Trunks gets stems from this one episode alone. Because I feel like a lot of people just view her as this weird and creepy old lady. But that's really only the case for this one episode. As for the rest of the show, her interactions with Finn are perfectly normal. I hate this episode. It's honestly a bottom 5 of the show in my opinion, as well as Tree Trunks' only true bad appearance. Thankfully, her next appearance in Season 3's Apple Thief is far better. In this story, Tree Trunks enlists Finn and Jake to help find her missing apples. This episode introduces a couple of new sides to Tree Trunks' character. Notably, this is the first episode to really depict her sense of justice, turning herself in when she thinks that she is the one who stole her own apples. We also get a peek at her upfront and confrontational side when she asks the bartender, "Where's my dang apples?" Very funny scene, always gets a good laugh out of me. And lastly, this episode introduces Tree Trunks' soon-to-be love interest, that being Mr. Pig. He helped Tree Trunks find her missing apples and, in his own words, never really left. This episode doesn't really do anything to imply that Tree Trunks has any particular feelings for Mr. Pig, but I mean, it's Tree Trunks, so... In Season 4's Dream of Love, Mr. Pig confesses his feelings towards Tree Trunks, resulting in the two officially becoming a couple. This makes for what is easily the horniest Tree Trunks episode so far, with the two smooching it up all over the place. Just look at how awkward they're making everyone feel. Really fester in it. This is an episode that a lot of people seem to dislike, and I can definitely see why. There's a lot of Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig kissing in this one. I personally think this one is just alright, has its moments, but is overall one of Tree Trunks' weaker episodes. Excellent song though, Mr. Pig has pipes. But while I mostly enjoy Tree Trunks in the first 4 seasons, it's Season 5 onwards that really amps up what makes Tree Trunks great and makes her one of my favorite characters. Season 5 was actually a pretty big year for Tree Trunks, as it's the only season of the show in which she gets multiple major roles. The first of which being a segment in 5 more short Graybles. This is one of my all-time favorite Grayble segments. Tree Trunks being offended at what she thinks is a middle finger is so funny. This is another story that really shows off Tree Trunks' sense of justice, taking the law into her own hands when the banana guards prove useless. She's a character with very strong beliefs and will make them known. Tree Trunks' next major role in Season 5 is only a few episodes later in Mystery Dungeon, one of my favorite episodes of this season. In this episode, she gets trapped in a dungeon with Ice King, Neptr, Shelby, and Lemongrab. And surprisingly enough, she ends up being probably the most vital asset to the team. She bakes a pie that attracts a rat, opening a secret passage. She's used as bait for the fish, which was originally supposed to be Shelby's role. And she resuscitates Lemongrab. Tree Trunks is kind of a little badass in this episode, I love it. And it's cool how they can portray her this way while depicting both her adventurous side and her motherly side. But this episode also has a couple really great character moments for Tree Trunks. Like when she sticks up to Lemongrab after he insults her. Or this absolutely brutal monologue she gives to Ice King. This scene is so funny for just how long it goes on for. Tree Trunks really digs into him. It's made even funnier by the rest of the characters just awkwardly waiting for her to finish. Tree Trunks really doesn't take shit from anyone. Mayhaps we should all be a bit more like her. Tree Trunks' final major appearance in Season 5 is in Apple Wedding. As the title would imply, this is the episode in which Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig get married, a pretty big episode for her. Back in Dream of Love, the two were hesitant to get married as they still needed time to get to know each other, but I suppose it's been about a year since then. I mean, it's not like this is the quickest it's taken for Tree Trunks to marry someone. Speaking of which, we learn in this one that Tree Trunks actually has 3 ex-husbands. Those being Randy, Danny, and Wyatt. The latter of the 3 being the only one with actual dialogue in this episode. Truly a pathetic creature. I hope he goes to hell. This episode also serves as our introduction to the King of Vu, as well as Tree Trunks' loyalty towards him. She's so loyal to him that she's willing to work as his servant just so he can officiate their wedding. And it's this loyalty towards King of Vu that sparks a rivalry between her and PB. PB hates King of Vu so much that she literally locks up Tree Trunks and all of her wedding guests for supporting him. Granted, she lets them all out after being affected by the sweetness of their wedding, but it's easy to see why Tree Trunks still holds a grudge against PB a few seasons later. Oh, and we also meet Tree Trunks' mama in this one, in what is sadly her only appearance. And we learn that she is possibly even hornier than Tree Trunks, which is awesome. Unfortunately, after this episode, we hit sort of a dry spell in terms of major Tree Trunks appearances. She still shows up from time to time, but doesn't get another major role until Season 8. That being said, we do end the Season 6 premiere with a major status quo change for Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig, that being the adoption of Sweet Pea. And just in time, before the two were about to get a divorce. It's kinda crazy how Tree Trunks got married, almost divorced, and adopted a kid in the span of 11 episodes. This is a nice expansion of her sort of grandmotherly dynamic with Finn and Jake back in her debut, allowing her to actually be a parent to a child. Their dynamic is very sweet. She clearly cares about Sweet Pea a lot. And seeing as we never hear of any sort of marriage crisis between Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig after their adoption of Sweet Pea, it's safe to say that he probably saved their marriage. The closest we really get is Mr. Pig freaking out over a kissing scene when Tree Trunks is in summer showers. But that aside, the two seem to be doing okay. But as we learn in Season 8's High Strangeness, Sweet Pea and Mr. Pig aren't the only family Tree Trunks has. Because of course Tree Trunks has an alien husband, and a group of alien kids. This is maybe the most ridiculous episode of the entire franchise, and I kind of adore it for that reason. You might catch me putting it in my top 20 of the entire show. But on top of that, I also really love the dynamic between Tree Trunks and PB in this episode, expanding upon their conflict in Apple Wedding, when PB's space probes accidentally cause harm to Tree Trunks' alien family. They really amp up Tree Trunks' anarchism here, making for what is easily her funniest episode in the entire show. Tree Trunks is by far at her best when she's just so headstrong in her beliefs. And they use the story for some great PB development too, where she and Tree Trunks put their rivalry aside to find some common ground. Season 5 PB wouldn't have listened to Tree Trunks for a second. It's cool to see that these two strongly opinionated characters can compromise with each other. Tree Trunks' final major role in probably the entire franchise is in Season 10's Reign of Fire. And as far as Sendoff episodes go, this one is basically perfect. I really love the opening to this episode, where Sweet Pea asks Tree Trunks if her life is perfect like his is. It's such a nice little moment where Tree Trunks reflects upon her life and confirms that it indeed was perfect. And the whole episode basically consists of Tree Trunks reflecting upon her previous marriages. Like High Strangeness, this one also gets pretty ridiculous, with just how many wacky swerves took place within Tree Trunks' lifetime. But it all goes to show just how fickle TT was back in her younger days, with Wyatt being the only previous marriage of hers that lasted for a significant amount of time, and even then she got very tired of him. Which shows just how much better her life is now with Mr. Pig and Sweet Pea. And to think they would have gone down the same path if it weren't for Sweet Pea. The story really shows how at peace and fulfilled Tree Trunks is at this point in her life. That she no longer feels the need to hop around from relationship to relationship. And this makes her probably final speaking role in Together Again all the more satisfying, living it up in Dead World 30 with all of her previous partners, excluding Wyatt, who went to hell. It's a brief moment, but incredibly fitting as the final time Polly Lou Livingston will ever voice the character. This plus Reign of Fire make for such a great final note for her. Tree Trunks does technically appear one more time via the silent cartoon world scene in Fiona and Cake's Prismo the Wishmaster. It's a fun, if mildly eerie cameo, and probably indicative of the way Tree Trunks will be used in the franchise going forward. They don't want to replace Polly Lou Livingston, so she'll probably only be making non-speaking appearances for the rest of the series. And honestly, I can't blame them for that. Polly's voice is Tree Trunks, and it would be incredibly jarring hearing somebody else try to imitate it. I mean, just listen to how weird Lemongrab sounds in the same episode. I think what I find most impressive about Tree Trunks' character journey is just how willing the crew was to switch up her status quo. From her arc in the Crystal Dimension in the first 2 seasons, to her relationship with Mr. Pig, to the two getting married, to the adoption of Sweet Pea. They really did a lot with her over the years. And I think a large part of what makes Tree Trunks so much fun is that you never really know which version of the character you're gonna get when watching one of her episodes. Whether it's horny Tree Trunks, badass Tree Trunks, or a mix of both. Truly a varied character. And if this video didn't convince you that Tree Trunks is one of the greatest fictional characters of all time, then you belong in the first Dead World with Wyatt. I've been Squill, you've been enlightened, and have a good one.